say I've lived through the best phases of American history, of history for women. As the saying goes, we've come a long way, baby. And see, you don't even remember that commercial, which was Virginia Slims at one time. You've come a long way, baby. And I have lived through that and coming a long way. I had another one of these dolls because they were very popular. And one of the things we accomplished in 1984, they were having a World's Fair in New Orleans. And Mississippi was setting up a pavilion and a display. And one of the representations of life in Mississippi was that they were going to do something like this, little dolls. And I originally had one that had, where you had the black end here and then under there you had the white, where they used originally to show the difference between black and white. That one got away from me, so somebody else made this one. But the negative representation, the stereotyping of black women was the world I was born into. And we still have a problem getting away from the good skin, the light skin, the dark skin, the good hair, the bad hair, and really being seen as strong, capable women. Now, it took me a long time to get away from the mammy image. And as I grew and as I learned, I became more concerned about Nubian queens, black women as queens. And so when I saw this outfit in a store, I said, I need to buy that for myself. It was an active stage for black women. And I'm going to say this because I saw a piece in the paper about Bill Cosby. Now, Bill Cosby is accused of things that are reprehensible, but I am reminded of the things that I learned from Bill and Camille Cosby. Bill Cosby, and I did find it online, produced 2 films early on in the 60s, Black History, Lost, Strayed, or Stolen. And it was an eye-opener because he talked about black women and the evolution of black women. Now, like I said, what he has done, what he's accused of doing, let me rush to say what he is accused of doing, goes totally opposite of what he set up in that black people have had a royal, regal existence that was either lost in the Middle Passage, it strayed from us, or it was stolen from us. So in most instances, what I've spent most of my life doing, trying to recapture, regain that glorious history of black women, doing as much as I could to add to it. And I got that from my mother, who had to protest to get adequate care for my younger brother who was crippled. And she simply did not accept second-rate status for her children. And once you learn not to accept or not to create a secondary status for yourself, you can go forward and be the queen, become the leader. And there's so many ways to see that. That's a reason why our organization, Women for Progress, use the Nefertiti as our symbol of royal womanhood, because young people must see images of themselves who were grand. You know, I wish I had run off a copy of the students from Mary McLeod's school early on. They were clean, polished, shine, clothes immaculate, and they did it for themselves. That idea of independence, being proud of yourself, being in control of yourself, it's crucial. So I hope in the future that these are the kinds of things we continue to teach to our young people. That's our task and our job. I hope that's it. I wish I could see and read some of these things that she wants to leave. And it's amazing that this is still the same hope that I go into the future with. I leave you hope. I leave you a desire and a thirst for education. I leave you concern for our youth. I leave you a respect for dignity. When I see young men walking around with their pants hanging down to their knees, it's not only disrespectful to themselves, but it's disrespectful to everybody else they come in contact with. Just say it. So we need to hold on to our dignity and respect for ourselves. And we need to have a respect and a concern for our racial dignity and hold forth with that racial dignity. But that's basically most of the things that I want to see us hold on to as we go forward. Any other questions?
In your life?
You know, I'm going to say, I guess I'm fortunate in that I had several people who inspired me and who were very active in shaping me to be who I am. And I guess the first people I have to start with and give credit to would be my parents. My parents and my extended family, because I had aunts who too helped to shape me. But my people were hardworking, God-fearing, courageous individuals who did not accept no as an answer. You always had to do your best in everything you did, and the expectations were high, and they just expected you to do whatever was required of you. And at that time, they let me know, as a young black person living in Mississippi, I had to work hard, climb high, and do more than my best to achieve. And so I tell folks, I came up under that era where to do less than your best was a sin. And you had to run faster, move higher, and do more than anybody else just to succeed and just to be in the race. That's what was expected of us. Now, moving from my mom and my dad, my extended family, and maybe my church people could also be a part of that extended family. Because in church, and it took me a long time to realize this, coming up, I was a little girl, but we had an old man. I guess he was in his 90s or almost 100. I read later on in a paper. And we called him Papa Tim. As I said, at that time, Papa Tim was in his 90s, near 100. And every Founders Day at church, he would spend time and giving details, telling us as young black people, what his parents, and it took me a while to realize that his parents had been slaves. He had come out of slavery because he told us all of those stories and things that his parents had gone through and urged us to go forward and do a lot of things. Now, I was a grown individual before I realized part of my love for history, preservation, studying the Civil War and things of that nature must have come from Papa Tim, who was an older man in our church. And the other person, I say Miss Aline Russell. Mrs. Russell was our Sunday school teacher. And she inspired me directly, because I can recall her saying, Dorothy, I'm going to make you the Sunday school teacher. I want you to teach Sunday school. And I was like, I don't want to teach Sunday school. She said, I'm going to ask your mama. And of course, it was over. I had to teach Sunday school then. But what she did, what she saw in me, was my ability to work with people, to learn, to inspire other people to learn. And as a result, those traits have stayed with me the rest of my life. That came just from her knowing and recognizing that I had some talents and abilities. So that was a Sunday school teacher. And public speaking, we had Miss Anna Patton, who was a speaker, teacher, motivator early on. And fun, I guess she could have been anything she wanted to be. But she was great, and so I picked up a lot of that from her. So these were women who came on into my life and started by saying, you know, you can do this. You have the ability. And this piece I gave you about Mary McLeod Bethune, Miss Anna Patton, Miss Medicine Harris, and some other ladies who were big in church work said, okay, I want you to learn this and say it on the program. You know, we had to speak at church, whatever the occasion was. I wound up being the graduation speaker for my high school class. But that was because ladies and men too said, get her to speak. And as a result, I started out with that speaking ability and learning the last will and testament of Mrs. Mary McLeod Bethune had an impact on me. What it did not only gave me information, but gave me a set of values I had to learn. And at one time when I was teaching, I had some Indian young people who spoke, and I gave that to them. But these are values that anyone who's leading any individual, I recommend that they look at Mary McLeod Bethune's last will and testament. We have few women, and note I say few women, in American history who are as outstanding as Mary McLeod Bethune. You know, having been born in the era in which she was born, she came up with the goal of wanting to create a way for black people, and especially black young girls, to get an education. And it's interesting, because I read back through this when I pulled it up and really said she wanted me to look at and comment on these kind of things. When I think of what's going on now, when you look at DeVos, who is the Secretary of Education, who has no idea of what black people went through. Trump doesn't either. You can tell they have no earthly idea that education was not open to black people. And many black people can't envision an age when you had laws saying you could not teach a black person to read or write. That was against the law. It was something you just could not do. Because if you educate a man, you forever ruin him for being a slave. And this is what we don't make the correlation now. Because if we're going to do anything about the incarceration of black men, people talk about the statistics, how many people are being put in jail, mainly because they're black men. And they are threatened to everything that goes on in this country. But if you educate them, if you give them a sense of values, you ruin him for being in jail or enslaved or hooked on drugs or anything else you want to say. So that's why, to me, her last will and testament is so powerful. We should be teaching it to every child in this United States, because then you would educate them to do what they need to do in order to be a success. Now, what else?
In your life.
You know, I don't know. Right off the top of my head, I can't think of any. Because one of the great things that, as I said before, I had in my life was strong individuals who gave me a sense of values of things to do, things not to do. Most of the things I possibly would have done were things that were, according to the law, I could not do when I was born. It's interesting because I looked at this and I've had access to it for all of my adult life, I know. And Mary McLeod Bethune, when she was writing this, it's about the same age that I am now. And you sit at this age, you know, your children are adults. They make the choices for themselves now. So I know if I haven't done the job with them, it's too late. Excuse me. And one of the things, the biggest piece of advice I've heard from Dr. Margaret Walker Alexander, who became a mentor and a person I greatly admired, she was asked that same question, well, it may be framed differently, but pretty much the same question. If you had your life to live over, what would you do differently? And I thought her answer was profound. And she said, you know, I never think of that. Because if I lived my life over, I might not make the same mistakes, but I'd make different mistakes, because that's a part of life. And I do a lot of things, I'm sure, differently, but who knows? The other conditions might damn me to where I would not be capable and accomplished as much as I have already. So one of the things I like is, I told my grandchild, I taught psychology at one time, and there's a rule that says you can never normally, you cannot go back to a previous stage of your life. If you're 16 now, you will never be 16 again. You can't go backward. You must go forward. Now you might live to be 116, I don't know. But regular 16, and I can recall, you know, little children say, I'm 5.5, which means they're already claiming the rest of it. They want to be older. And then after you get a certain age, you don't want to be old anymore. But I can recall thinking to myself, oh my land, if I can ever get to be 18, I just thought something magical was going to happen. Oh, when I get 18, I'll be out of high school, I'll be in college, I'll be doing this. Mama won't be on me all the time. And that was not so. I still had those controls, expectations, and the whole bit. Because I went from college to being married, to having children, to having a job. And I found that in each one of those situations, there was some authority figure that I had to answer to. So I'm at this age now, and I hope I can say I'm answering and setting my life based on what God expects of me. But basically, live every day to its fullest. And it's interesting because in studying the Bible, you ask that question, what advice would you do? When the young man went to Jesus asking, which is the most important commandment? And Jesus said, love your God with all your soul, with all your might, and you won't have any problem. And then unto that, love your fellow man as yourself. And I find that to be quite, of course, he said it, so you know it's the master commandment. So if you learn that, you take a lot of worry and stress off yourself. You don't have to worry about anything. Just love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. And then love your fellow man equally on that same order, following Jesus. And just think what peace you ought to go to bed with at night when you can do that. So what else do we need to do? So life